Welcome back to the Behind the Wealth Show. I'm your host, Roger Abel. I've got Elias with me again. Looking forward to a great show today, Elias. My wife actually asked me, and I'm going to pose this question to you. When's high school football done? Because she's ready to get our babysitter back.
Let's see. So tomorrow, this week starts playoffs, so 4 more weeks.
Okay, so four at the max.
Yeah.
But if they aren't in the playoffs or knocked out, they're already done.
Yeah. What team is your babysitter helping?
Linmar.
So it depends. I mean, their season could be open or it could be over first round. I don't know who they're playing or remember who, but
Yep. Well, we were talking about
any day now.
Well, she's excited. Our babysitter's on the POM teams, and she's excited to get a little help back into our life. But today's outline actually got me thinking about you, and I just can't even believe I read this, but this is an article that I was reviewing for today's show, and the title's on CNBC, and the title is, "What would you do to save money? How far would you go?" And here's what caught my attention. And you have a background in the trades, and you've been involved with carpentry and some of that stuff in the past, so you have kind of a working knowledge. But CNBC did a study. 33% of homeowners said they would hire a questionable contractor to save money. Would you hire personally, knowing what you know about the construction industry, carpentry, would you go find a budget-friendly contractor, even if you already knew they were, maybe not honest with the price, maybe they're overestimating what their skills are, or the quality of work isn't? I mean, what do you think?
So I have a short answer and probably a longer answer, but no, I wouldn't.
Does it depend upon the job?
No.
Okay.
No, because you're either going to do things correctly or you're not. And there's nothing, I don't value saving money when it comes to a project. I value that it gets done correctly in an efficient way. So for me, and the contractors that I use for projects, I have 2 friends in that business, and they're both very good at it. It's quality work, and they're not scared to charge you for it. And I don't ever negotiate the price because I value their skills and what they can do. So I pay them what they charge, and they're not. I think what they charge is very fair. They charge on the higher side of that market, but I know what I'm going to get if I go price out the contractors on the lower side of that market, and I'm going to get bad communication. I'm going to get a project that's not done correctly, and then I'm just going to end up doing it myself.
Okay. So let's flip this around and compare it to our industry. There are people that try to save money when they hire an advisor.
Yeah. So if I'm going to remodel a room in my house, I want the optimal outcome. I don't want an outcome.
So think about it. That is true. So, I mean, all the craze 5, 7, 8 years ago was, hey, robo-advisor, right? Hire a robo-advisor. Those do everything for you. Well, most of them have gone away, or they've been gobbled up by financial institutions as an add-on to assist advisors with smaller accounts typically. But think about a couple of things you just said. You just said that you're probably going to get bad communication. What kind of communication do you think you get from an 800 number call center? Bad communication.
Not what you want.
How good is the project going to be done? Not that much. Not that well. All those things equate to what we do. And that doesn't mean you have to go hire the most expensive person. It's kind of like tax people, right? When I'm looking at, when an individual asks me for a referral for a tax preparer, I need to kind of understand their question for me to determine where I'm going to route them. Because I've got one who is on the ultra high side of things from a price standpoint, but he specializes in farms and he does great work. So if you have a farm or if you have a business, that's typically where I tell you to go. But I don't send the person who has a relatively simple tax return, who's getting a Social Security check, a pension check, and taking a distribution from an IRA, I don't need to send that individual to this tax preparer. So I think you have to understand what your needs and desires are when you pick out a financial professional. But understand, if you're going with a low-cost option, you should expect low-cost service, also known as do-it-yourself.
Yeah, well, and that spans across industries, right? Like the example you brought up is with contractor, and there's a shortage of contractors, so it's hard to find the good ones. But if you find a good one, you should be willing to pay them for their knowledge, and you shouldn't look at it as I'm paying them for the hours they work. Because a good contractor is also going to be more efficient. They're going to get the project done faster, and they shouldn't be punished for being good at their craft.
So they'd probably have the motto, we do it nice because we do it twice.
Yeah, that's not what you want.
Hey, okay, next part of this, because we can just look on the surface and be like, well, people are just trying to save money. This article was printed October 9th of 2024. In any way, do you see this as a reflection of the economy today? Wherein 2 years ago, we just paid what it would cost to get it done. And now, because inflation is taking such a big bite out of the everyday budget of individuals, are like, man, maybe I would look to, even if the guy's kind of known for doing some shady stuff to save half the money, maybe I'd do it. And is that a reflection on the economy? I think maybe it's a reflection on what's actually going on in the real world. People need things done, but frankly can't afford to have them done.
It is. It is a reflection of the overall economy. It's a tough decision because really your options, if you really want to save money on something like that, you're going to get on YouTube and figure out how to do it and just do it yourself. That's the best way to save money, but
maybe
you're not going to save any time. See, if you quantify your time that way, then that's not a good choice.
Dude, I've tried to do stuff on my own, like harder stuff. Like, I had to fix the toilet paper holder because one of my kids ripped out of the wall. I can handle that,
Did you get that?
Yeah, I got it done.
Good.
I'm not all that. Hey, I got the paint roller out the other night.
Good.
Looked good. Brad actually came over. He goes, that's actually pretty impressive that you did that. Because I had to patch the holes and texture it. But point is, a lot of times I think there's situations where people think, hey, doing it myself is going to be cheaper. At the end of the day, a lot of times that's not the less expensive option. And I'll go back to during COVID. Thought I was going to change my own oil in a diesel truck. Bought everything to do it. Do you think I ever did it?
No.
Nope. I ended up taking it to the shop. So that actually cost me double because I bought all the stuff and I didn't do anything with it. So I just was curious whether you thought that was a little bit of a reflection on, the economy and what was maybe happening.
I think it is. And it's kind of, I think one of the weird things or something it's been challenging for people to, especially people that follow the markets, when you're trying to wrap your mind around what is going on with this economy. Because I was just the other day looking at some stuff, listening to a podcast. All these technology companies are just making so much money. And then if you look at the services they offer, so I was starting to think, because like a lot of their, some of it's cloud storage, like their like fundamental offerings, the cloud storage, like if it's Apple, it's the phones, but they're really offering, like that's kind of a part of economy that offers convenience to people's life. So we know people value their time, right? Because they're not cutting their spending on the technology that they have in their life to, store pictures in the cloud or have a security system at their house, like all this stuff. But I do think it's like the services and stuff, like remodeling a house and all that. I think those things are suffering more from the slowdown at this point, which that could just be a reflection of the time. kind of times changing where people are so used to all of the convenience that that technology can provide for life that's kind of moving in a place on your budget where you're not going to really cut that out. Like that's almost like, you're not going to give up your house. You're probably not going to give up the technology and all those benefits, but are you going to delay a bathroom remodel? Yeah, absolutely. Are you going to delay buying a new car if you can put less money in and fix an old car? So it's just kind of interesting how certain areas are impacted and then certain areas are not.
Well, I think that is the changing landscape of our current economy. And I've had this discussion with multiple people over the last couple of weeks. And to your point about technology, I'll hit that first. I 100% believe that phone is no longer a discretionary item. Your phone's not a discretionary item anymore. It's a need item. And I'm going to tell you why. How many banks almost require online banking? Most. Like they don't require, but that's how they do it. Guess what you have to do online banking? Two-factor authentication. You have to have a cell phone to do it. I see the cell phone as an integral part of society today.
Well, let's say this morning you set your phone on top of your car because you had stuff in your hand and you pulled out of the driveway and fell off and you accidentally ran it over. And then would you interrupt your day to go get another cell phone?
I'd cancel every meeting I had because how am I going to do my work without it? And
how many people are in? That's almost everyone.
Think about it. My wife bounced her cell phone off the back of a boat seat into the lake. She wanted to go home immediately. She's like ready to drive 5 hours home 2 days early. I got to get a phone.
Exactly.
And yeah, we can live without it, but I think it just shows the pure reliance on having that piece of technology because it is the way you're connected, not just to, your bank accounts or your email. You're connected to your friends in your community there. That my wife got her phone back, but didn't have Facebook for 5 days. She was locked out of all of her stuff. She didn't have her Apple ID. She just felt completely.
Yeah. I wouldn't be so anxious about not having access to social media, but what would get me is not having access to my email
contacts,
and then our internal messaging system for work. I would get bad anxiety, not feeling like I can't communicate with people that I need to.
Okay, so that kind of handles the technology, and I think your insight into, hey, people would give up a bathroom remodel before they're going to give up their phone is 100% accurate. But here's something I've talked to some people about in our current economy. And there's a Wall Street Journal article I was reading kind of spurred this. It's titled Meet the Henrys. And Henrys are high earners, not rich yet, sorry. The six-figure earners who don't feel rich. And this is the conversation. If you've owned assets, if you've had significant amounts of assets, so a home, a 401k account with a good amount of money in it, real estate, just assets of any kind in the last 4 years, you've done exceptionally well from a gross, estate standpoint. Everything has went up in value. But if you're under 30 or 35 years old and you haven't had the ability to accumulate significant assets, you're getting your butt kicked because everything's more expensive. You can't buy a house, too expensive. Interest rates are at 20-year highs. It's really tough. If you haven't had assets the last 4 years, you're definitely worse off than you were 4 years ago. But if you've had assets, you've done really good. Now, having assets doesn't mean your day-to-day living expenses aren't different. But, if you bought a home, it's up 40%. You have a 401k. If you had a 401k since 2020, how much is it up? 40, 50%. You've done pretty good.
Yeah, you should have done pretty well. So I have a couple thoughts on that. And I think historically, and if you were to talk to people in older generations, and I get where younger generation, even making good income, still feel this pinch. Throughout time, though, how many people have really become rich before their mid-40s or even 50s. Like, it's pretty normal for life to be pretty challenging, and maybe you're not quite accomplishing what you want to. But if you do the basics right, you will get there. I mean, it is going to get harder because, like, you know, look at we've been looking at homes online. A nice house is, you know, in my mind, a nice house is $300,000. Like, for our area, not anymore.
6.
Yeah, I think
It's
450 to 6 is
It's
like
6.
where the $300,000 house now. It's like 450 to
The
600,000.
house that was $450,000 6 years ago to build, it's $650,000 today, and we are not in like this expensive real estate market in general. Like, our real estate's not that expensive when you look nationwide.
Correct.
But if you want a new build, you're not getting anything for under 6. That's bigger than what you have. And then couple it with what? 7% interest rates. We're back to almost 7% on interest rates again.
Yeah.
You know, there's a brief window you could have went and refied, maybe, but you're at 6 3/4 on an interest rate now, which historically, is that really that bad? Not really. We're not used to it. But so then it goes back to, it makes it harder for people that are trying to buy a house and build wealth. It makes it significantly harder for them.
It does. If you look at, you know, and we have
Now, the stock market doesn't matter, right? Because they can make their contributions, and that really doesn't matter from a wealth building tool. But you don't build all of your wealth just through the stock market. You build some of it there. You still have to have a place to live. If you're stuck renting for 15 years because you can't get into that house, man, that's brutal.
Yeah,
You paid somebody
it's brutal,
else.
and it's only gotten worse.
And so I had this talk with a banker friend of mine, and everybody thinks inflation's linear, which means it just goes up the same amount every year. The reality with inflation is this, Elias. If you look at the average appreciation of a home, let's say, let's call it 5%, right? Whatever it is over time. And we had this massive appreciation in the last 2 or 3 years. But then we go 5 or 6 years with basically no appreciation. That's
how it works.
It's just like
comes in waves.
Right. Like, but think about it. If you don't get a 5% increase, you missed out on the 5%.
5% increase on what?
On your house. Let's say your house is worth $600 today.
Yeah.
Right? Let's say in 5 years it's still worth $600,000. Well, yeah, the value of your home actually went down 25%. You just didn't see it. You think it's the same. It's not. Because if everything's going up 5% a year, I'm just using a round number, really your house value went down.
True.
It did.
True.
No, it did. Think about, because if you had some other asset,
I don't really like to dissect the numbers that much, but yeah, you are right.
Right. And that's how we get to this linear, hey, we have a 5% increase or whatever inflation is. Just, we've had a bunch right away. Over the next 5 or 6 years, incomes will catch up. Then we'll get back to an equilibrium of where people can start to buy homes again because they've got a 3% raise every year, 4%. Home prices haven't increased. They stayed stagnant. Then we'll get back to an equilibrium in like 3 to 5 years where people say, oh, yeah, well, that's affordable now.
Well, and I think some of this conversation kind of, all right, well, so what's the solution? Well, I think it lends itself to, if you were to talk with people that you know that are successful investors and people that have done well, there's like very tried and true ways to be successful with money. And there's not a whole lot of people that over time, if you have a good savings rate, you buy good investments, you get your debt paid off, you have a house that you can't afford, you don't just live in the biggest house you possibly can, things will work out. And it's not going to get easier. I mean, that's just that's the facts. Like, we're always going to have inflation. So assets will continue to go up in value. So it's not going to get easier. So really all you can control is to be committed to the things that pay off in the long term. for assets to go down, we'd have to have a deflationary environment, and no one wants to live in an economy with deflation. That would just grind everything to a halt, because if every consumer thinks, well, I'm not going to buy something because I think the price is going to go down, that would just wreck an economy.
Well, not only that, but as prices do go down, people make less money, which causes prices to go down more because they have less money to spend. It's just a really bad negative spiral if that actually happens.
Correct. So hopefully we can, and we've kind of in this soft landing environment like people have been talking about, and that's going to be an ongoing process. Hopefully we can continue chugging along and get the economy back to expansion mode and people can start to make more money. It's just not going to happen overnight. I think one thing people need to understand is whatever the outcome is going to be, and whether we start heading towards recession or we successfully complete a soft landing scenario, it's not an event that has like a deadline. It's an ongoing thing. And the economy, how profitable the businesses can be, that's really what's going to drive just the overall stock market and our economy. So that's kind of like the things you'd really need to focus on and just kind of keep in the game with. A lot of the other stuff is, a lot of it's noise that's out there. I don't think people necessarily just ignore everything you hear. You should use it to gain perspective. But if you are, if you're a Henry, you're someone making good money, you're doing a lot of the right things, and you feel like you're not being rewarded at this time, I get where you're coming from. You will be. There's no way. There's no way it's not going to work out over time.
Well, I think you also just made a good point about noise. Like, noise in general isn't great for the average investor. Like, it just adds stress to what you're doing. And we've had a core principle at this company probably for the better part of 15 to 20 years. One of the original founders actually wrote a book, and part of that book was, how to build a media filter, because there's so many things coming at you that it's easy to get sucked into the trap of the noise, especially if you're on the internet. I'll tell you, do you remember, was it a week ago? I had a call from a client and he just said, hey, I want to make sure everything's okay, because he had another friend who was like massively prepping, because on October 26th, there was like a very specific date. He told this individual, said, hey, on this date, the market's going to crash. This is going to happen. And guess what?
That hasn't happened.
It hasn't happened. But we had lunch. We had a discussion about this individual, and just said he's been paralyzed by what he's watching on YouTube. Like, he thinks it's going to happen. I was at dinner last night with another friend of mine, and they have a friend whose wife is like prepping food, storing food. I mean, because she's concerned about what's going to happen with the election.
Hoofda.
Well, but everybody thinks, hey, it's going to be different. And of course, it's going to be different. It's going to be a different president. It's going to be a different outcome. But look through the history of time. The long-term outcomes tend to be the same. Like, the sun's going to come up in the east. It's going to set in the west. Some days it rains. Some days it's cloudy. Some days it's sunny. But it's kind of a repeatable pattern, right? Almost like winter in Iowa. Well, it's going to come. We don't know when. It's going to come. So building a media filter, especially right now with the election, everything that's going on in this world, is really important.
And the media filter idea, I don't think it means to ignore things that are going on. I think the key with the media filter is find places where you can get information that's not dragging you down, essentially. Because there's plenty of good information out there. But one of the issues now, especially with the internet, and anybody can make a YouTube channel and say anything they want.
except for us, because we have a compliance department.
We have compliance oversight. But I don't. Now, there are people, and I've had conversations with people, especially the last few years, folks who are retired. There's less and less retired folks that are even turning the news on.
No.
Because they're happier not with, and the news is sensational. I mean, just look at, okay, what do we watch the most? CNBC and the financial news programs on there. Well, any day there's a bad trade, a lot of selling in the market. It's a huge event.
But so one thing about that channel, I don't think it focuses on the negative. They have a lot of people that come on there and talk about the positive.
They do, but their ratings are also higher in bear markets.
Oh, for sure. Well, market's down 8%. They don't ever say market's up 4%. That's not the headline.
Right.
Like, what was it? We saw some headline about the market going down because it was like a week or two old on some webpage. I'm like, dude, it's up 15% since that time.
Yeah.
It's like, do all these things. And so, one, figure out where you're getting your information. Do you remember back to did you ever watch Wolf of Wall Street?
Yes.
Do you ever remember where the husband, was it Wolf of Wall Street? It's Wolf of Wall Street, or it was Boiler Room, actually. Boiler Room. And the husband had bought this stock, Medtronic or whatever, this individual stock. I didn't know if that's a real one. But the wife goes, how did they find you? How do they know who you were? Well, you should maybe do the same thing with your stuff on YouTube. Like, how did they find you? Who is this person? What are their credentials? But that's not what happens. And I catch myself doing the same thing. I'll watch them like, oh yeah, this guy seems like he knows what he's talking about. Do you think I go Google him and research him or do any of that? Nah. Just take his word for it.
There you go.
And that's what people do on the internet. So media filter. And one of the things I think having a media filter does, and having a really rock solid financial plan does, it helps you drown out the noise. And when you figure out what your risk capacity is, it really helps make decisions in times of chaos. And part of the reason I'm bringing it up, there's actually something out there now called stress-adjusted returns for your investment portfolio. You ever heard of this? I haven't.
I have not.
But as soon as I heard of it, I'm like, well, this is basically, hey, how much stress do you put yourself through to get your returns? The more stress you put yourself through, the bigger chance you have of making a financial mistake or being a bad investor. And one of the things in this article that I thought was really great, it says once you start to give your investments responsibility and you know why you own the investments in concert with, getting an optimal outcome in retirement, your stress level actually starts to come down and you're less anxious about what's actually happening with the stock market.
Do you think our clients that we help here are a reflection of that?
I think some. You have to think about this. We have clients who've been with this company for 40 years, right? Like legacy clients from other advisors that we've taken over their books of business. And let's just use 30 years ago, 20 years ago. 20 years ago, it was all about what's your risk tolerance and what's the better investment, because information wasn't as readily available. Well, today, good investments are pretty easy to find. So now it's about putting a plan together, figuring out what your risk capacity is, how much you need to be successful. There's a lot more like planning involved. I think the clients who've went through the planning part of it, so let's call the clients who've onboarded with this company in the last 15 years, I won't say definitely, but I have a feeling they're the ones that don't have the propensity to make an emotional investment move. Yeah. The clients earlier than that, I don't think have that, because it wasn't the core philosophy of the company at that time. And over time, as your philosophy changes, so do the customers that you're working with. I go back to 2022. How many people that onboarded with this company in the last 15 years actually called and were panicked about their bond portfolio being down 14% and stocks being down 22%? Not many.
No.
They understood why they owned what they owned. So I really think one of the ways to reduce stress for retirees or people approaching retirement is really understand why you own something. And then if you're retired, understand how you're going to navigate a difficult stock market, which that's why we use the bucket strategy, right? That's why we have cash for people. They know how we're going to navigate. It's like, well, okay, yep, market's crazy, but I know we have a plan to deal with it. And that's being proactive versus reactive. That's all that is.
My speculation would be over time, the families that engage more in the financial planning process and stay focused on those items, like assigning responsibility, investing for an optimal outcome. I mean, my speculation that the more you engage, it's going to be correlated with successful outcome. Because if it was really, we talk about it all the time, if it was really possible to time the market and do things like that, this would be significantly easier.
Statistically impossible to do it.
Right.
And I want to throw it out there. I think any retail investor who's engaging with any advisor that's doing planning, it's not just us, like we're not just the secret sauce. If you have an advisor you're doing planning with, you're probably in better shape. You're going to feel better, right? I mean, I would hope so. I tend to think we do pretty snazzy financial plans. But at the end of the day, if you're engaging through that process, you likely feel better regardless of who you're actually working with.
I would agree with that. There's a lot of really great people in this profession that do a great job with planning. So I think for investors, that's a good thing, and you should engage in that type of stuff.
If anybody's not doing planning, clearly they can get a hold of us at btwellshow.com. We'd be happy to help you.
Yes, we would.
I think this has been a great show today. You have anything else you want to close with?
No, good show. Yeah, everyone, thanks for listening.
Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA SIPC. The opinions voiced in this show are for general information purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, and financial or tax advisor prior to investing. Premier Investments and Wealth Management and LPL Financial do not provide tax advice. Please consult your tax professional. Economic forecasts set forth may not develop as predicted, and there can be no guarantee that strategies promoted will be successful. There's no guarantee that a diversified portfolio will enhance overall returns or outperform a non-diversified portfolio. Diversification does not protect against market risk. Rebalancing a portfolio may cause investors to incur tax liabilities and/or transaction costs, and does not assure a profit or protect against loss. All performance referenced is historical and is not a guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly. There is no assurance that the techniques and strategies discussed are suitable for all investors or will yield positive outcomes. The purchase of certain securities may be required to affect some of the strategies. Investing involves risks, including possible loss of principal.